Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of SASA Archaeogaming Live, featuring SASA gamers Dr. Kate Minetti, Alexander Vandewalle, David Serrano Lorenz, and Julie Levy, and featuring special guests each week. What is SASA? SASA stands for Save Ancient Studies Alliance. We work to promote the study of the ancient world and engagement with our human deeper past, building a grassroots movement through outreach, collaboration, accessibility, and public scholarship. We work towards our goal of inspiring a wide, inclusive community of scholars, learners, and students. SASA does this through many different projects. We do Archaeogaming live streams every week. We also have book clubs and partnership streams featuring other ancient studies organizations. We also have an access database with over 1,300 websites, a searchable database of ancient studies resources, ancient studies vocabulary lists on archaeological terms, and we do research on the downward trend and much more. So please check us out. Where can you find SASA? You can search Save Ancient Studies Alliance on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter or X, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Please make sure to follow and subscribe. It really does make a big difference for us. Some protocol for this live event. Please be kind and respectful. Listen and ask thoughtful questions throughout the event. We'd love to hear from you in the chat box. Please be patient with technology and those administering it. And these Archaeogaming live streams are on Twitch, and recordings will be posted on our YouTube channel after the event. And there are definitely spoiler alerts. Last but not least, if you enjoy what you see from SASA, such as our Archaeogaming book clubs and reading groups, please consider becoming a supporter of SASA with a recurring donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can help us to save ancient studies. You can also subscribe to our Twitch channel for free through your Amazon Prime account. We have information on how to do that on our website. And thank you very much all for joining us. Have fun.
It should be recording right now.
It is.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so yeah, hi everyone who's watching this on YouTube or Facebook or wherever. We have a very special video for you all today. We're actually talking today with Andi Smithers, who is one of the developers on one of the games we streamed a couple months ago, Rome Pathway to Power or Rome AD 92. Yeah, Andy was so kind to reach out to us about the game, and we were gonna talk with him about it and ask him about his experience on it. How the development of the game worked. But first, maybe, Andy, if you could briefly introduce yourself or tell us a little bit more about who you are, that would be fantastic.
So I'm a self-taught game programmer going back to the 1980s in the UK. And I spent 30 years writing games up until a few years ago. I was at Disney. I worked on some of the titles there as well, like Club Penguin and Disney Infinity. And we moved out of first what we call in-house development and went more external. So I've been working on other bits and pieces in like more advanced tech in Disney now. So but sort of not really writing games, but definitely in the graphics field heavily. I think I can tell you that I worked on one of the rides in Disneyland, which is called Smuggler's Run.
Wow.
So that's really cool when you get to work still in that field on. So we're bringing games into the park. So so yeah, it's cool. And yeah, 30 years, and then I moved from the UK to obviously the United States. So kind of messed up my accent. So yeah, go back to England, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're American."
That's interesting. That's so cool. Can I ask before we dive into the game, like, so you're working on like in Disneyland right now. So how do you, or like how do the skills of game design, transfer to a context like theme parks, or like how are you able to, uh, draw on some of those skills of game development, game design when you're working on theme park rides?
When I worked on that title, yes, because some of the things I put in is some really robust things that we do in video games. Is we know people play games for hours, right? So you want to detect bugs in the game, and they could have had that machine running for like 24 hours, right? So we wrote some software that would actually detect bugs 96 hours into its running. We would find some issues. And so we wrote, we could definitely bring some of that stability and safety into the environment. The interesting thing was it worked. We found bugs that you just wouldn't see in regular debugging, right? I get fixes. We found a bug like 10 hours in. And just as an anecdote, it was a floating point error in the GPU. So the GPU would be basically doing an animation off of a floating point number. Yeah. But after about 10 hours, it's got really saturated. And so we'd start getting like time warps and stuff. It was very bizarre. And it's like, unless you've run games in soak tests and understood how to debug them long term, you just wouldn't find these things. You'd just get bitten when someone would complain like 12 hours into a ride, something had gone wrong. The other thing I bought, there's a term called monkey stick. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's basically you smack on a joystick and all the buttons as fast as you can all the time. So we created something called Ewok stick, which basically did the same thing.
Yeah.
So you can mash on all the buttons as much as you can, and it will not break. It's designed to like run as fast as it can, and you could. It was part of the soak testing. So yeah, that kind of experience does come in handy. So it's that ride. I mean, it's got one of the highest up times. So I'm quite proud of it. So.
Wonderful. Wow. And diving into Rome, actually, what was your involvement and your implication in the production of Rome? 30 years back.
It's one of the first titles I actually did professionally. A gentleman named Steve Back, I consider one of my mentors. He was fantastic. He taught me, and you see this in Rome. He came up with this phrase that the screen is just a window into a world. Now, you have to go back 30 odd years ago to understand what that really meant. It meant that the world ran even if you didn't see it.
Yeah. And
you can go 20 years later and watch games where you'd like pan across and you'd see like characters just fall over in front of you because the animation state hadn't been updated yet or something. And so I've always taken that gem to heart, right? So it's been, I just wanted to mention that because he gave me my very first opportunity in in-house development. So that was my first job working on Rome. I worked on, basically I came in to take over an audio system, which was called the RGP1 or Richard Joseph music player system. And you see that in a ton of like Bitmap and Millennium games. So like Chaos Engine music is pretty classic. I mean, that actually has like 8 tracks on an Amiga where it layers samples and the music gets layered on top of each other using the DMA to actually splice it together. It's a pretty advanced player. And that was then ported to the PC many years later. So that's really my first involvement. But on Rome, we were doing basically a port. So that was my first game that I had to work on. And that game was, so basically we were porting from the PC, which is what Steve Graham was working on. And as I mentioned, Steve Graham was actually a historian, a history teacher, and he just wanted to build games for like teaching. And he goes on to do Creatures. If you actually look him up, he went on to do Creatures. which was the first sort of neural net AI stuff. Like we're talking in the early 90s and mid 90s, and then Creatures 3, I remember, was like 2000. So it's way ahead of where we are now. I'm not sure what he's working on. I haven't spoken to him in years. So we were doing the Amiga port, and so the way we ported the PC game is actually quite novel. We ported, because it's all in assembler, so it was 8086, 88 assembler, and we had to port that to the Amiga. So we wrote a macro language. Alan McCarthy, also a very talented, very, very skilled programmer, also a guy very much admired for what he did. I'm kind of babbling, I know. It's midnight. He actually came up with that in Robin Hood. So they went with this macro language. So basically, bulk of my job was going in and because the order of operations are reversed in 8086 versus 68000. So I had to go in and using the macros that we had bound to like AX, AL, AH registers, and then we moved them into like the D0, D1 or address registers. We had all this macro mapping, but I had to physically go in and switch them because of the order of operations from Motorola. So that was fun. And also you have endian problems. So you have little endian and big endian. That's basically your byte ordering. So when you actually read 2 or 4 bytes, they're reversed on 8086, which was a lot of fun if you're actually reading any kind of 16-bit or 32-bit data. So you have to make sure you map that correctly as well. So that was basically my job for a few months, but it was fun. But I'm a graphics guy, so on the Amiga version, if you check out an Amiga version of the game, I started adding graphics and videos, and I added video effects like shadows. So I wanted like all the menus to actually stand out. I added some nifty little shade effects for fading, because remember, the Amiga uses bit planes versus pixel mapped, byte mapped 0 to 56 color palette on the PC. So we had so many less colors. So I'm quantizing. We had to quantize data, get it on the screen, make it work with the palettes, and then on top of that, you can't do shadows. So it had these stipple shadows that I put in, and then the other thing is I like things running 60 frames a second if I could, or 50 in Europe. So the PC version was a bit sluggish, and so I did a lot of optimizing. Once we got the core game in there, there was a lot of make this run as fast as possible. And then, so you'll see differences in the Amiga, mainly because Steve was actually writing the game, and I was just slacking off writing effects.
Go on.
Yeah, so I was just gonna ask. So maybe for anyone watching who hasn't played the game, for example, could you briefly like describe or talk about what the story is like, what the gameplay is like, what the game is all about, and if you know maybe what the original vision behind it was, or because you mentioned it was also used for history education, or it was being planned to use for history education, for example.
It was called Rainmaid E79 for. And it got changed by the marketing group. So that's not. It's like it's up to what Millennium wanted, right? So and the Maxis. And there's a lot of funny things going on in that game, but like I said, it's a world. It runs independently, whether you can see things or not. If you go up into the hills, the farmer goes and plays with his sheep, which is quite amusing because he lifts them up and he like. And this is it uses a decision tree AI under the hood, so it's not scripted per se. There's a little bit of logic going on there. So, and I mean, I kind of borrowed the concept of decision tree. So when I got exposed to that, when I went on to another title the following year, I actually rewrote AI for that to make that work, and I went with decision trees, which actually worked really well. But I mean, that was the first I've been exposed to AI. I was like, there was no way you learned this. It was like some kid or some teacher, I should say, that would actually come up with this, and then you get exposed to it, and then that's pretty much how the first few years of game development was. Just listening, trying to learn as much as you can, listening to people. That company, Vector Dean, had some of the best talent I was like in awe of them all the time. Chris Sorrell went on and did Operation Robocod. I'm not sure if him. Really stunning programmer. And you just don't really get. You listen and you try and learn as much as you can, really, while having some fun too.
Actually, you mentioned it, and it's true. There is a lot of fun in this game. This world sometimes is hilarious, and you don't see it coming. So was that a decision that was, or do you remember if it was taken from day one, or is something that emerged organically, or?
From what I remember, there was always a plan with the game, and it was always with Steve. Like the game itself had 5 distinct areas. You had Herculaneum, then you had the rise to being a commander. Then you go over to Britain and beat up the little guys, and then being successful there. You'd come back, raise to Senate, go over to Egypt, beat up the little guys, come back again, and then try and beat up the emperor. So you got 5 distinct areas, and it was always planned. And we did some interesting stuff to get that to work on the Amiga, right? Because you got less memory and less. We designed it so if you're on floppy disks, it had a custom disk format. So it came on 3 floppies. But it was always designed that the first, you put one disk in, if you had a 2-drive system, it worked best in a 2-drive system. You'd have like disk 0 in your 500, and then in your second drive, you would put disk 1, and then that would basically do 0 disk swaps for the first 3 levels. And then after you get through that, you would actually switch out disk 1 with disk 2 going into the second drive. And again, no swaps. And we replicated on the disks certain data, so it was always seeked the same regardless of which disk was in. It had, if I remember, we did some copy. Your save game could actually be saved on it and duplicated onto the other disks and stuff, just for fun. And the format was like a hybrid GCR MFM disk format as well, which is really weird. The funny thing is the duplicators couldn't copy that game when it came out. It was like 5 disks. I ended up having to go down to the duplicators to explain how it worked because we got too much data on that. When people tried to crack it, they literally came up with more. It would not go on. You couldn't crack it on the 3. It was on 5. In fact, most of the pirated copies of the game were of the hard drive version. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Commodore did a OEM deal with Millennium. It's called the Epic Pack. It came with a game called Epic, which is a real classic 3D sort of space shoot 'em up like Battlestar Galactica. It also came with Rome. Rome was actually shipped with that as well. So, and it was all installed on the hard drive version. But because we had to get it out in time, it only had 3 levels on it. So when people ripped off the game, they ripped off the 3-level version, not the 5.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So they had a compressed edition of the game.
Just taking, because the data came on the hard drive. Oh, I can tell you some funny things about that. I might be digressing here. Sorry.
No, please, by all means.
Commodore would probably flip out if they ever found out, which they were about to. The way this game worked was completely removing the operating system. There was no operating system. We removed it, and we were storing all our data because of the way PCs worked with short word addressing. All our variables were in the first 64K of RAM. But if you're running Kickstarter or Workbench, you've got an operating system sitting at 64K. One of the problems we had down there when we were doing the hard drive version, because it had to run friendly, and it had to run in a window, and it had to run with the hard drives. So we would toggle out that 64K of the operating system would sit on in the the expansion RAM. So it would we'd stick it up into effectively the top 512 K. God, can you remember? It's like Ks now. We're not talking. And then anytime it did any drive access to load a file, it took the operating system 64K and paged it back in, swatching out the variables into another block in expansion, and then it would do its operating system, load in everything, and then come back. But for the longest time, we had a bug that if you had a second drive attached, it would just lose it. It couldn't find it again, and so they were like, "Yeah, after we played your game, we can't find our drive one. It would disappear." I'm like, I have no idea.
This is gold.
So yeah, it did some funny things. That game did some funny things.
I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you have recollections on the very creative process back then when the game was being developed, about the reference that you were keeping in your head to create this world. Were you thinking about the classic movies, Spartacus and all these things that we all have watched, or were moving freely? Or
so, from a creative standpoint, I wanted it to look polished, right? So that was my direction. The gameplay was really Steve, right? He was running the lead on, and I would offer the things that I would come up with. I'd offer it back to him, and then it wouldn't go in. And I would like, I could write this for you on the PC, but I could do this if you wanted it. But it's like, no, time, right? We're just cranking on a game to get it out. It was only a month, but creatively, I had very little control outside on the actual game itself. I mean, if I found bugs or issues, we would obviously highlight it to Steve that we needed to fix the AI on some things. And I would try and make the graphics look the best they could on the Amiga, and I would improve them when I could. So if you compare the two, sometimes some of them look better, some don't look as hot. I did some of the art myself to do touch up. Another weird, funny thing I had to do is in the US, Maxis did the publishing. Maxis said you can't have naked people running around. So the European version of the game, they're all naked in the baths when you go and try and take a token. The US version of the game, they're not. The thing is, if you try to put Speedos on a guy that's like basically 5 or 6 pixels, and you put that pixel in the wrong place, it doesn't look like he's wearing Speedos. So I did some like touch up, and the guy's running out. I'm like, that's worse than what we had.
Did you have to face many demands of this type, like a lot of changes for the American version, or of course this is the funniest probably, but any other?
Yeah, there was language conversions. Obviously, we have 5 language support in there. German was actually it's always the hardest support. It's like needs 30% more space to fit it on the screen. So that was actually always a challenge, especially when you get to those speech bubbles at the top. because they're actually procedurally generated as well. So depending on the size of the text, so that was always entertaining to get. You had to test all these languages. In fact, German language was always just filled up the screen a lot. And then on top of that, the fonts were pretty tough too. So on the Amiga, we have this Nibble font. I used to do artwork when you could get away with it, and so I'm like used to use this Nibble font. But when you get to foreign languages with umlauts and stuff, it became really hard to make things look really legible. But we do the best you can. So other creative things, the fade effects, like I said, I really liked. I like transition effects and making them look good. Smooth scrollers, I did not like the way the PC scrolled text. So I did a lot of work on the Amiga version to make that look really slick. But we didn't have much screen space. So because we knew that on the US version we had to support it. So you can't go into overscan. So the 50 hertz, you get the overscan screen region, but you couldn't rely on that because you had to run on the Maxis for Maxis and on the US. So you couldn't just suddenly add content. So it was kind of always problematic. Though I think we might have done that on the opening titles that give you more visible titles on the UK version. And trying to think what else from creative. I remember having a fun time with like Bacchus, trying to get that to work on the Amiga. That was because it's really dark and had a lot of colors, and also getting the I think we had flowing lava color cycling, basically. That was also very problematic because you can't just do a clap rotate easily with it. No, you have to remember it's 32 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
It's
Don't worry at all.
the game is older than I am, so I can imagine.
Wow.
That's the scary thing when when I realized how long ago. I was only a young kid, right? So like I said, it's the first opportunity. I'm self-taught. Steve Back, he respected self-taught programmers versus like university taught, which was actually kind of interesting because now I would tell anyone you want to go to university. I mean, I keep drumming that into my own kids. Have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, and so it's like you got to go through university just to have a chance at survival. So, but he was an interesting character. He just wanted to make sure he didn't want classically taught programmers. He wanted people that would like figure things out for himself, and I understand that. Having to figure out a lot of areas. I'm working on graphics. I worked on audio. It's cross fields, right? You're on multi-disciplines, AI, physics. I worked on a port of Sensible Soccer, so that was some significant work. Trying to get 16-bit physics working on an 8-bit machine. So I was doing handheld consoles back in the early 90s. They didn't come with much processor power. And so he just wanted to pick out people that could figure things out and make things work.
Yeah, I wonder, like, seeing where the game industry is now, and the how games are made, and of course last year there was heaps and heaps of news articles and controversies about how publishers and developers work. How do you look back on game development, like in the early 90s? Like, do you think the way things work or the way games are developed, like should go back to like this more experimental perhaps period, or how do you consider days?
I mean, I grew up in it, and I did it. So the other thing that people forget is it didn't pay.
Yeah.
Video games. My first job in UK was about 14,000 a year. That's not a lot of money for a programmer. But on the flip side, my careers advisor said you can't make games for a living. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to prove you wrong. So you did it because you loved it, right? That's the only reason you would do this. And and the hours, you do not understand how many hours that these games would take. I did a port of Sensible Soccer in 3.5 months, right?
Wow.
You couldn't come up with a proposal nowadays in 3.5 months. And in fact, some games or game engines you couldn't even compile in 3.5 months. So yeah, I think
go.
It's nice to be nostalgic, but the reality is, at the time we had weaker machines. We didn't have the memory to fill. Games have increased in scope and scale because the technology increased in scope and scale. It was the driving force. I think what people miss out going through the 90s especially is the growth of the industry and how fast it moved. You know, 1 year I'm working in DOS, and the next year I'm working in Windows 95, and now I'm working on PlayStation 1. Then a few years later I'm on PS2, and it's like I go from writing games that were considered platinum at 100,000, and then I'm writing games that I did an OEM game, G-Police, that was on ridiculous number of units, like hundreds of millions of units. It grew that fast, and the scale of it you just can't comprehend. And so the games grew because the memory grew, the power grew, and you had to fill it. And I don't ever think we should look back on retro gaming as anything more than retro gaming. It's fun, but I don't. In fact, I kind of regret sometimes going back and playing games I used to like because, like, this was a lot better. I swear it was a lot better. Like watching you guys playing Rome, I'm like, why couldn't they figure this out? I'm like, you even said a few times, like, yeah, I need money. I'm like, you had a dagger. You had knives on a table in the first level. You saw it there, but you decided just to like get enough money to get on the boat. When in hindsight, I should have just reset the game and just robbed all the people who were going to die because they couldn't get on the boat. There's no ethics in there, I don't think. Take all the money, get the lucky dice, go back on the boat. Life gets a little bit easier.
That tells you a lot about how us as gamers and players have changed our mindset there too.
But you did highlight. There was no internet.
Yeah, exactly.
You bought this game. You'd be determined. This cost me 10 quid or 20. I'm gonna figure this out. Damn it.
Exactly. Also, like, what is it like as a game designer to watch other people play your work? Do you often have these experiences? Like, no, it's obvious that you need to do this, or what is it like? I mean, I can imagine it's a specific type of experience seeing someone else experience what you've made for them to experience.
There's two ways of watching it. There's watching a person in the store playing it, which is always great because they actually do what you expect. And then there's watching a professional tester play your game. And it makes you want to go, what are you doing? You're not supposed to. Oh, it broke. So, watching someone, the first time you go into a store and see your game, I remember seeing Rome on the shelves. And it was euphoric. That's the only word for it.
Yeah.
You've got published that. I worked on that. And then you see someone buy it, is like, holy crap, someone willingly bought that. And it's like, wow. And the first time, Rome was like, an eye opener for that. It was my first release title. And yes, just seeing that feeling is very hard to. It makes you want to go and do better, right? You want to go out and do another one. And like I said, it was my life. I worked for a company in Toronto. So after Vectording, I went to a company called Eurocom. That's where, again, Eurocom is a very famous British game developer for decades. They did a version of, they did the reboot 007 GoldenEye. They worked on tons of games over the years. I worked on a few games at the start when it was getting started. And like I said, we did a port of Sensible Soccer there, and then seeing that one sold out, and I could not get a copy of that one. That was really annoying. And then I'm not sure if you knew this, but they did the Royal Mail did a bunch of stamps of games, and then to see your game on there, it was like,
didn't know that. Yes.
Wow.
Just blew me away. So I ordered a bunch, and then I was shipping around to British friends over here. So I said, I'm not using them for stamps. No, because the US wouldn't take it. But yeah, I ordered a bunch and then gave them to some friends here. But yeah, that was awesome to see. So, but yeah, so go. I was saying I went to like hours. I was talking about hours, like the amount of time you have to put into this, right? You want to go in and do something else. So after I did Rome, and I was working on ports, and I got very good at doing ports, but I didn't want to do ports. I want to do my own game. I talked to Grey Matter, and they said, come over to Canada. You can take over this game called The Condemned, and you can basically just come up with the design. You'd be basically the project lead as well as writing it, and Microsoft is going to fund it. I'm like, that sounds cool. And this to get, I don't know. I must have been nuts because I'm in England. I talked to these guys. I like what I heard. I only done this over a phone. There's no internet still, right? It's like in 93, 94. Sorry. So it's right at the dawn of. I mean, you can use CompuServe and stuff, but and we use BBSs a lot on the Amiga. So, but I said, yeah, I'm going to go to Canada. I hadn't visited. I accepted a job without actually figuring out how cold it actually was there. I'm going to do this because they offered me something I want, which is not a port. I could have gone to Nova Logic and did a port of Comanche to the Amiga, but it's a port again. I don't want to do ports. I want to write my own game with my own project. That's what they offered. And so I packed everything up, including a cat, went over to Canada, never looked back. Spent 3 years on the project and cried because it got shelved.
Oh, no.
Not because of the project. That's the sad thing. It's not because of the project. It was timing of events in the world. There was it was a pretty violent game. And there was an event in 97 that was very violent over here. And all violent games got pulled. They weren't going to ship them. So we got shelved for that reason, because it's Microsoft, and Walmart said we're not going to put this on the shelves, and that was hundreds of thousands of copies of games that they wouldn't be able to sell. So it is what it is, and I put heart and soul into that game. That is first time we're doing real physics. So I ran a small little team. We had like 4 engineers on that. So that's where you do it. When you see your stuff on the shelf, you just want to go off and do bigger and better. That game, we went from doing $100,000 games, and that game was a $5 million budget, which was unheard of. Right in 2005, it's the dawn of the multimedia industry, and
Mhm.
that's when you could see everything changing. And people wanted to they wanted more game. That's coming back to that original question. People want more game. They want a game. Look at Grand Theft Auto 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I still haven't played it. I'll play it. I found out that the second one, the 6th, was coming out in basically 2 years.
Yeah.
My son's the reason I haven't played it is I got a 12-year-old,
Mm.
and if he sees it, he wants to play it, and I've been very selective in what I play. But he really wanted to play. That's one of the ones he really wants to play. And I'm like, no. And when they announced 6, I goes, okay, I'll let you play 6, knowing that he's going to be like nearly 15 when he comes out. I'm like, I can live with that one. Strategic plan. But yeah, it's like people want more game. They want more experience. You guys probably really love the Assassin's Creed series, maybe.
Yeah.
I love that series. Right? It's just stunning, and it's so in depth, and it's accurate. I mean, it feels. I go off to a history book. I got a ton of history books here, and I go off. I'm like, it's so close. I'm like, that's really cool. It's like, more game. Everyone wants more. I can see games getting to the point, and you see this with Metaverse. I can see it, that people are going to get to games that are so big that you only ever go into one game, and it's just just nuance. I think that's what Star Citizen's trying to be. It's the one-stop shop for a game.
I think also the model of making games bigger and like it's going to the point of breaking in a certain way, because there's people expectations that are always getting bigger and higher, but there's only so much innovation you can do in a given time. And like what we're seeing now with the Elden Ring DLC, last year with God of War DLC, like or all those remasters that they're doing, like they're trying to put out smaller projects in the meantime while they're building up for something bigger in couple, like God of War, the Greek games, you had like 8 of them in 7 years or maybe 8 years or something like that. Now there's 2 in will be like 2 in like
but there's
at the same time.
There's a possibility that changes.
Yeah.
And there's some pros and some cons to especially if we get to AGI. But if we start dealing with those as support tools, right? Not so much. I mean, I can see them being very helpful for like, here I've generated out part of a level, right? This is how it works. Now build me like this part of the level based on this, and then sort of flush it out, or take a historic. This is the style we want. We build this component to it, and then watch it propagate. Then we can start seeing some pushback on bigger games, and then quicker development times. The downside to that is bigger games take longer to play.
Yeah.
And therefore, you've got that sort of scale of how long is it going to take me to play through a game versus, if it's episodic, or, to when I play it again, or shovel me another $100 new title. But and then you've got the games that, like the remake of Final Fantasy VII, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I've been waiting for the sequel, and I'm like, didn't I just? That was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's too long. It really is too long, because I'm like, I was waiting for it, and like, I've got other games to play.
Yeah. No, that David and I were saying this 2 days ago as well. We were started our playthrough of Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, and that was a game 2017. In my mind, I thought that's long ago, but 2017 is 7 years ago at this point. It's almost like it's this, pretty recent game that we just haven't had the time to play yet. But it moves so fast, and now there's a sequel announced for this year as well. It's
Yeah. I'm actually playing Ghost of Tsushima. I hadn't got around to playing it when it came out. I had it on disc, but I had so many other games, and I hate putting discs in my machine. And but on the flip side, I'm not going to buy a game I already have on disc. It's like, it's kind of like a mental like. And then it just came out on the PlayStation library, and I'm like, oh, I'll play that now. So then I've been playing that for the last couple of weeks, and really enjoying it. And again, I get a sense that was there a period of time with Mongols trying to invade Japan? Surely, so I got to go look it up now. And then my son goes, "Oh, can I play?" And I'm like, "Okay, if you play the first part of the game, hopefully you won't get any further. It'd be okay." It's where he gets to Ghost Dance, and I'm thinking, "Oh, this might be a bit too much." So,
it's interesting that you mentioned the fact of looking up historical events based on the games you play. Do you know by any chance, because you mentioned Rome was also created with this like educational ambition, whether people or did you get comments, for example, from people who played Rome and were like, oh, this helped me learn about
I think so. Yeah. But I mean, from what I know, the man, I guess he was going to ask you if you have ever heard any kind of, feedback or review.
Okay.
Really?
He's back. Yeah, I get the jet.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, I actually learnt while playing it, right? Also, funny enough, so when, I mean, Apollo, Bacchus, all those pictures, I didn't even know they were classic references to art, right? Had no idea. Like I said, I was a young kid. And, but definitely, I don't think I heard many people, I didn't meet many people that talked to me about what they found they enjoyed in the game. But a lot of people I found didn't get to the battles, right? That was the one thing that I remember. They didn't get to the Britain and didn't understand, they go over there, the Romans would go over there, beat up a bunch of people, and it would give them status. And you use that status to come back and become a senator, or pay tribute, and that's what the whole point of that was. And there's no real discussions with that part on in the game, because no one got that far. Because if you get to Britain, even, it's really hard. Like, I mean, even when I was playing and developing, I would die all the time. I mean, trying to get through that. Your guys would do the weirdest things, like just suddenly run off screen, right? And then like, come back here. No, stay in the formation. Build your fort. Wait, okay. Now, and then they do silly things. And controlling them is always fun. And of course, you get their scouts come around and they just see just one half of your force, and they were like, oh, they'd go chase them. I'm like, oh, couldn't get. But no, I didn't really have many people make much comments if they learned anything. I know I did. When I played it, I learned. I mean, which I suppose at least one person did that.
But I imagine many more as well. But.
Yeah.
I think more people. I think games like that actually showed it was possible to put some depth into games. So when you look at games later on that come out, some of them might draw from it. Another friend of mine, we have a map in Rome, right? And if you think about it, there's just no way we have. People forget this. If you're playing any strategy games, you don't have maps like that, And then his name was Mike Singleton. He did Lords of Midnight classic series of games on the Spectrum. But he says, and I never thought about it until he said it. Think about what Napoleon had to deal with in battles, right? Because the way you play Lords of Midnight, there's no map, right? The map is what you have in your head or what you write down. have to figure it out as you go. And then he says, now you've got armies and you're trying to position them. But then there's not just fog of war, there's communication. It's not like, you know, I need all these troops over here to move. How do you coordinate that?
Yeah.
It's really, and he says, they don't have telephones. They don't, you've got an army straight, you know, miles apart, or tens of miles apart even. And you're trying to coordinate all of that. And he says, and it was just an eye-opener when he was like, just think of how hard that is to actually manage. And to actually make, it's amazing that, you know, these battles even got fought sometimes. Because you have to like coordinate that, you know, they have to meet up. You got, how do you tell this guy that's flanking that, well, actually, they're not there anymore? So it's all about trusting local armies and local generals and let them dealing with it. And yeah, and until he mentioned all this stuff, and so he hated games that had maps. So all of his games, he didn't put maps in. So he wanted in a strategy game. So all of the Lords of Midnight didn't have maps. You had to make your own maps. So, but when you think about all the games you play, like strategy games, and the ones that say, "Oh, this is like 19," where Eastern Front battles, even, it's still communication isn't fast. You know, it's only in modern era that we've had that. So, but no games really emulate that.
That's interesting.
Think about a single strategy game that emulates that sort of communication lag, and could be not fun. I don't know.
No, go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was just thinking that you're right. I think I was thinking of that the morale system in Total War, like, so you're sort of trying to get them to do something, but they refuse. But it's still different from, I think, what you're describing. But yeah, it's interesting that, you know, making a game about this and trying to simulate the system of warfare or like doing this makes you think about these elements, and it's how like game making or game development can be a tool for, you know, thinking about elements that if you read like a text, like historical text, or if you watch a film, maybe you don't think about, but as you're trying to do it yourself, you know, you start to realize these things more.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I've always wondered if it's possible to do it. I don't know if it is, and it might not even be fun. And that's the other thing with games; it has to be fun. But you know, if you could emulate lines of communication so that really get it nailed down, I don't know. No, I wonder if anyone will try doing that. So, a realistic Napoleon simulator.
Depending on how many views this video gets, we might see.
We get 5 views, and 4 of them are going to be my family. So.
And sometimes sorry.
No. So.
I was just wondering. Sometimes do you think about stuff in the development process or in the ideas that you were popping up with those times that you wish that were more present nowadays, or that could be tried nowadays as games are now, or do you think that's impossible nowadays?
So in most software, I mean, you mean testing like different ideas out rapidly? Yeah, I mean, that's why I like Unity, quite frankly. You can rapidly test in that. I've done tons of little tests that don't see the light of day. That's how I distinguish using Unity versus using, say, like Unreal. Unreal, you can build quality software relatively quick, but Unity, you can build prototypes just to prove something complex out quickly. So I've done a lot of prototyping of ideas in Unity just for fun. I'm about to do it again. So that's one of my tools I like to use just to build things quickly and test something out. So yeah, you can. And then they've got like A/B testing that they use for like actual games. So I don't see it in games. You see it normally as a marketing tool, but I've never seen it really applied to like having game mechanics and then have a game release that might not work so well. In some areas, you're not sure, but they can switch it between 2 different flavors. Maybe the AI can be switched. I mean, if you could apply that quite easily into development. That might actually fall under AI testing, right? You have the AI, we get some AI testing going on where it could actually make those choices, find out that people don't do this or they do this more so they can balance the game better. We're still in that kind of infancy. Like I said, I don't fear AI in game development. I know some people do. I don't think they should worry about it. The main thing is, especially with like AGI, it's meant to replace like average person, right? It's supposed to be like that mental age of an average person. What you're trying to achieve is a lot more than that, and you need pretty advanced people building these systems at the end. So you need a path for that to happen. So I see AI as a huge tool to help people, you know, and we're seeing that with like Copilot and stuff, where it sits alongside you and helps you out. May even be good for debugging at some point. I can totally see that being useful. So by debugging, you run a ton of logging, right, on a game, and you get a crash bug and it sends it off to a server and you get your crash logs and you look, oh my, what's going on here, right? And so you go in and you get your stack. So you have your stack trace, you go through, it's crashing here somewhere. And then you have to go through, well, do we have a replication? Do we have a way of doing this? And then we have to go in and try and figure out how to replicate. All this stuff, I can see automation tools coming to do all this that will be phenomenally good, that will take millions of logs and then just say, hey, this line of code here is causing a problem. Go in and look at it and see what's going on. And I see that speeding up and helping so that how many games do you play that just crap out on you? So I see some huge benefits coming down the line with that stuff.
Yeah, I think we're still like very early stages. And with any new type of technology, there's this initial period of, panic but I think after a while we'll start to see I think both the good and the bad on everything like that, I think.
Yeah, is it going to be on the scale of the motor car, right? So think about when the horse came along. We had the horse, then we had the car. So when the car came along, we lost the horse. We went from millions and millions of horses, and you have all the livery, we have all the feed, all the infrastructure that went on to support that. All disappeared basically overnight. But a new infrastructure came up, right? You got gas stations, you got car repairs, and you got car salesmen. But you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You don't, but no one at that time would have seen that future.
No.
They would have just been fearing for what they knew. And I think we're seeing kind of a modern version of that, right? And this is where you guys teaching history can actually bring that into the forefront and people remind them, yeah, we go through this a lot. This isn't the first time, right?
I mean, early 1900s when film came along, people were saying the same thing, and now we can't imagine a world without movies, and we, give awards to movies that change the world and stuff like that. So it's this continual cycle of change that disrupts a sort of state of equilibrium that goes through. I'm sorry.
We call them film.
Film, yeah.
But we're sort of digital now, and we emulate the film grain.
Exactly. Yeah. That's true.
No, the world changes. You're right. Movies is a good example too. Entertainment, and the thing with movies, it did something that we hadn't seen in previously, which is the creation of the star. Movie stars, right? It created a whole new potential for people that might never have seen it before. Actors used to almost be shunned when you go back far enough. then if you go back even further, they weren't. But then it depends on which era, right?
No, that's true.
Yeah.
No, it's,
Or,
I think there's a lot of just I mean, don't fear the changes and stuff. So, I kind of get off topic again. I'm sorry. I just talk.
No, that's good. I mean, we went for about an hour. I think don't fear the changes is a nice way to to end here
Good
today.
takeaway.
I don't know if anyone else has if anyone has something else they want to shout out or ask or plug or no. In any case, yeah, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for your time and for your flexibility to do this at such a late hour for you as well. This is really interesting and I think we've heard a lot that we will think more about. I think, and it's always like so for example, I work on games and history or mythology. It's such a mystical space of how games are made. Like we know how movie sets work. You know, we've seen them on documentaries. We haven't seen that with game design. So I'm always intrigued to hear more about these experiences and how that actually works, because it's such it's not something we hear about that regularly.
Well, yeah, in game design, like I worked on a game called Emperor's Tomb, which is Indiana Jones. And some of it was like, sending artists out to basically on location to create the art for it and stuff. And just because you might be in a senior position, you might have good ideas, by the way, and they just never to a game.
Yeah.
I've never liked the idea of indies shooting people or being shot. Right?
Yeah.
It never got into that situation. They always miss. So. And I was a lead on a project that I was like, I don't like him being shot. I don't like this. And like, why can't we have it so he's lucky. If you actually look at that, he's lucky. Why don't you give him, instead of a health meter, give him a luck meter? His luck meter runs out.
That's a great idea.
So when you run around a corner, you'll see a guy with a machine gun, and instead of just shooting at you and your health dropping, right, he'd shoot at you and his gun jams, and he's doing this, trying to get it to work, and your luck meter's going down, and you have to get there quick enough to deal with it.
Oh, wow.
That would be, wow.
Yeah, I will play that every day. Wow.
Yeah, I don't get to make those calls. No one likes that. Yeah, I like you write games because you like to play games and you like new mechanics, right? You want to try experiment, and in some regards, people aren't willing to experiment. In regards, that comes back to your other question. So, but there's no reason why you can't. So, try it out, see how it works. It was really fun talking with you guys. I don't want to monopolize your time either.
No, I mean, yeah.
Our privilege here. I mean, thank you so much, Andy, for being here, for losing some gaming and sleeping time for us, and thank you so much for reaching out. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you guys keep in touch. I probably remember some more stuff. And like I said, I worked with a really cool bunch of people on this title. Steve Brand. I wouldn't even know how to get a hold of him now, but knowing the name, knowing how to find him would be, if you can find him, that'd be cool. He would tell you more informative on that particular game than I. I could just all the bizarreness of naked guys running around and having to appease the US market.
Yeah, I mean, we are in the time of sequels, so who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a market, or even like, could you get AI to like, okay, go back to this old game, rebuild this old game, but just spice up the graphics. I've seen some AI generated taking the old Lara Croft, making it human. But actually taking an old game and making it and modernizing it purely by AI would be quite hard, but more realistic than trying to build a whole game, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe.
At least at this point, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Definitely. Cool.
All right. So we'll.
Yeah.
Thank you again, and like you say, we'd love to do this again if we can get a hold of Steve, for example. That would be great. But in any case, I think we have a very interesting discussion right now, and yeah, I'll I'll stop the recording now.
Okay.
Yeah. Feels bad